Hi, students. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim, and thank you all so much for all the love and support. Hope you all are doing great. I came across this video and I thought I'd bring it here because this has always been Black people's experience, and especially Black women and all that. And it's kind of titled where the fear of Black anger comes from. You know, one thing with these people is that they think that we do not have any right to be angry and all that. It's always okay when we laugh, like, Black people laugh out very loudly, and then when they are sad and you also see them express that sadness, they are always like, like they immediately tag you loud, they tag you aggressive and all that, especially Black women. You all already know that, like, that stereotype, the angry Black woman and all that. Now, let's get into the fact that they also do not feel like, treat us like human, because there is nothing you can tell me that you are human and you do not see someone, probably because you do not look alike and all that, you do not see them as human. You're probably not on the right track and all that. Then another one is trying to minimize Black people's experience. When you tell them about your experience and all that, they try as much as they can to minimize it, like it is not valid. What you feel is probably illusion and all that. They feel like we don't feel pain. They feel like, we're not supposed to be angry. We're not supposed to push back and the rest of it. It's just so forth. I'm just like a whole lot. But you know what? Let's get into this.
None of you would know this, but the video that made this account what it is today, that you all found and ran with, happened when I got up from a Thanksgiving table conversation that was going nowhere. I had been listening to a dear family friend tell my family that the ongoing stress and pain that people felt due to race and class differences was a choice, and that as a group of people who had enough privilege to insulate ourselves from that pain on a day to day basis, why should we care? Why be angry Black women when we could be happy Black women? Someone, it seemed, was afraid of being categorized as a sapphire, that whole caricature of Black women as angry and nothing's ever good enough for them. This fear obscured the real power that is Black women's anger, not that we're hypersensitive, but that we are sensitive to the boundaries that society is willing to cross, which is the definition of anger, just being aware of a boundary that's been crossed. It's easier to make the conversation about my anger than the scary realization that slavery has normalized in our economy this way of relating to each other in the workforce and in the workplace. Knowledge of this is how you can take small actions to protect yourself from the way corporate powers and corporate legislation seeks to undermine your financial stability for its own gain. We have something to learn from the dissatisfaction of mothers and women, and Black women in particular. To a point, that's a conversation, why bother, that I'm willing to entertain, because it is about this national neighborhood and how we decide we want to relate to each other and what we owe each other. What I've noticed is in these conversations, making it doesn't necessarily make people aware of the problems with the economic system in America. It makes them more loyal to it and the disassociated, numbed out reality it can give them. Matters that people like Rachel Rogers are trying to make intergenerational wealth and ongoing wealth for marginalized people and Black women especially. But even she knows and admits it doesn't end up destroying the trapdoor of disparity that still exists and is in place. That question towards Black girls, why bother? Why wear your silk pressed head over it? It's less of a question and more of an accusation. What they're saying is, you have enough, girl. But what I have to ask is, at what cost? This question should anger all of us, whether we take our kids to summer in Nantucket or we don't know how we're paying for daycare next month. It should anger us not because that person doesn't know the answer to that question, but because of the fundamental assumption that's embedded in it, which is this American economic way of thinking that only thinks in the shortest of terms and how something affects me and me alone. This idea that at the core of making it in America, you have to deploy this ruthless ability to forget who makes it possible and who pays for our instant gratification, our endless consumption, and our 24/7 access to products. Being bothered is how we forget what it costs everyone else to live the way we do. The 2023 actor and writer strikes happening, and normal everyday people not siding with the people who make the sandwiches and clean the sets, but with these giant corporate executives who want to buy a fourth house. People whose work and labor that makes that wealth in the first place, their work is being shaved down, their profit is shaved down to pennies a month. And yet all we saw online was this infighting about how people don't work hard enough and nobody really knows how to make it, and people signed up for this. Why are we defending massively compensated executives instead of advocating for fair wages to the people who make that possible in the first place? Alyssa Court has found out, and many other researchers, that Black women and women tend to make up the lion's share of the care industry. There's this growing, increasing need for 24-hour or overnight extreme daycares because our corporate system is set up so that people have to be on call now for these super erratic and irregular hours. A very large portion, like over 40% of the American workforce, works non-standard hours, which is hours over 40, and it's usually split up between a couple different jobs. That's because companies purposely cut your hours at under 30 so they don't have to pay for your health care. This is what Alyssa and other researchers would call the forever work environment, and it is protected by American law. Hospitals and massive conglomerates that we all use on a day-to-day basis regularly make their lowest paid employees work the most irregular hours, and they don't stabilize this. Forever work environment, which is a corporate choice, it is not a necessity to make billions of dollars, chops up people's schedules and weeks in ways that make it untenable or impossible for them to care for their children, have families, or just have a life. The average person to just have food on the table, save up for future college payments for their kids, have a normal vehicle, pay for their rent, have some childcare so they could actually have a job, to do all of those things, just to have a life, just to have a family. You have to be working insane hours at multiple companies and have sometimes two people doing that. You can't make a 3:30 a.m. start time, or you get sick after years of working for this company and you need to take a couple days off. They can fire you without legal recourse. That's how we've set this up, on purpose, intentionally. Who is making half of all this possible? Black women and women who are working these daycares and barely breaking even. 2017, the second round of this legislation that could change and make corporations stabilize their workers' schedules, it failed. People voting against these bills in Congress, in Senate, representatives, all those people, they are banking on overworked, tired, exhausted constituents not knowing what's going on and not understanding who's lobbying them. They take money from these corporations and then they write laws that work for those people. Before you think this is like a very particular poor group of people who just can't get ahead, this is nurses. These are professors now. These are all sorts of people because the middle class has been so hollowed out in favor of corporate interests. They're the people in your neighborhood. This is the prospects that face a lot of your children. It's not about people who don't know how to work or don't know how to work hard. In Alyssa Court's book, Squeezed, and in almost every other thing I've looked at that talks about the American workforce, these are people working so hard on every single page of these books. Work ethic is not the problem or the liability. Our humanity is. The initial wealth of America was built on indigenous technology, indigenous pre-cultivated land, and indigenous knowledge. It's further collected through an American healthcare system that only healed Black people just enough to squeeze more work out of them. Sustained through a concerted effort to make invisible and diminish the domestic labor that makes corporate profit even possible. The money that runs this country came out of an economic system that could breed, discard, and break Black bodies. The major change that's happened is who gets to be earmarked to create that profit has increasingly widened. Can gobble up anyone who's not in the 10 and 1% of society. In the past, we had no problem with slaves being churned out and used up to create money. And the thing that we're being asked to do today is ignore the ways that same machine has evolved. I'm asking you, as public theologian David Dark says, to remember everything money forgets. Remember everyone power forgets. You can remember to look for the humanity in your neighbor. It increases your capacity to see your own humanity and your own inherent dignity. Create a mindset that honors human life and not just the capital that can be squeezed out of it. Not us staying stuck in the past. That's the only thing that's going to help us move forward from the enslavement mindset. Slavery and victim mindset, people keep asking us to lose because we want to talk about these things. I don't think you're ready for what it means to lose that. That looks like articulating the invisible issues and finding ways to practically move past them. Original quote is, God remembers everyone money forgets. And maybe I have to remind people that the tradition I come from, the Christian tradition I come from, in the very first early scriptures, God is named by an enslaved woman abandoned in the desert who thinks she's about to die. After the systems of the world have used and abused her, she calls out and is seen, and her pain is affirmed. She's been left to perish in a sea of nothing, and her child, her pain, her issues, and her very self are witnessed and seen. He famously says, "You are the God who sees." Might look at me and think that the best thing my parents gave me was my expensive education and all my privilege. The greatest thing my parents gave me was a faith tradition that tells me that every single person matters, and what we do with what we have and what we do with each other matters. A story that tells you that you suffer alone, that you are alone to blame for the racism and the sexism and the pain that hurts your life, it's not a story worth protecting with all of our bodies and our lives. Yes, inequities hurt everybody in various forms, right? There's a spectrum of this. I totally understand that. Some people's problems would be other people's dreams. Downplaying our experiences and refusing to connect them to the wider pain other people are suffering, that doesn't help us stop any of it. And own our privilege and various advantages, and also say we're not tolerating this story anymore. Because the time for forcing us to do that, it's over. You don't need to know everything or read everything or have a fancy degree to start pushing back and making life safer for you and the people you love. Just have to care. I was wondering how we could break down the sapphire caricature that's still being used to control Black girls, and you guys handed it right to me. Disappointed some of you yet again, because I am supposed to perform 24/7 Black gratitude and limit my thoughts on media and culture to light, easy breezy takes. I am supposed to be miserable looking at things I love, movies, history, and media, and looking at the context that gives those things meaning. And I'm not supposed to be using my time to look at how those stories and histories affect your everyday life, because I'm supposed to spend all my time thanking God that I was born on fifth base. Instead of commiserating with other victims, I should be shopping more than I already shop, and playing more than I already play, and relaxing more than I already relax. Everyone's so concerned with me and my misery. I promise you I'm good. On a serious note, to everyone who is concerned that I am self-victimizing myself, I want to apologize to you on behalf of all the people who taught you to first minimize your own feelings and your own experiences and your own pain. That's not easy. I have famously never been a chill person. As a kid, when I found out about the system for storing chickens in pens, I cried. And then when I found out about human trafficking, I was destroyed. I have always been obsessed with patterns and stories and why we do what we do. It's no surprise to anyone who knows me that I became a student of government and history and politics, because not only am I interested in what we do, but I'm interested in why we justify it, how we justify it. My idea of a wild weekend is to go to the same museum 3 times in a row. Last weekend, I went to a museum and I got very jealous and wanted to rip the button off of her. But there's a lady called the explainer, and her job is literally to yap and talk about everything in the museum to people who come and visit. My life crumbles overnight. You can rest assured you will find me leading a team of explainers at the museum. That's what I get to do here, and I love it. And I love talking about these American stories with you guys. Why does that trigger people? And is that new? Nope, it's not. And today we're going to introduce that little mechanism that's used to shut Black women up. Because if they can't own your body, they sure as heck try to own your mind. For my white women and my non-Black women and everyone else, this still applies to you, because the mechanism for divorcing you from your lived experiences, that sense of weirdness when you feel something or an unpleasant interaction, that divorce is used to protect prejudice and bias. Being able to gaslight and silence you into never critiquing anything is how they keep you from finding solidarity with other people. So the sapphire caricature came out of the 1800s, and it originated with the sassy mammy type. So what this is it portrays Black women as angry, bitter nags, emasculating forces, constant complainers, very hypersensitive. Let's remember what Black women were historically supposed to be: servile, non-threatening, passive, and unseen. In the 1800s, the normalcy of putting Black women in those boxes through enslavement was being politically and economically challenged by the culture at large. Women were being seen, wider culture, for the first time as people who might have opinions about what is happening to them. They might not be passive, they might actually be active agents of change. So remember, this was a huge part of Harriet Tubman's success. Her disguise was not necessarily her clothes, it was her Blackness, because people saw this short Black woman walking around acting like a servant, and they didn't assume she was a danger to white supremacy. They didn't assume she was this great liberator and this spy for the Union. She used that story of her being the serving, docile, quiet woman with no opinions to her advantage, and that's how she liberated so many people and brought the Union to victory. Do you know how many other Black women, white famous movie stars, white women, used this idea of female passivity to their advantage to get things done, and not only the Civil War but other wars? A great essay. It's free online. It's by Lily Loughborough, and it's called The Male Glance. And it's how, when we look at female works, we tend to not assume intentionality or genius. We think that in a glance, we know the totality of the woman's mind and her work and her genius in this. And it's not much. And if it is genius, if there is complications in it, it's because it was an accident. If you want to say I'm making that up or that's me self-victimizing again, I would encourage you to take one semester of American history or read one book, and you will see this is not the story I would make up. It's very depressing. Back to the sapphire thing. By creating the sassy inherentness of Black women, people, the ruling class, could shunt responsibility of the burden of white supremacy and sexism onto the person they were oppressing and not themselves. Black women aren't complaining because we treat them like dogs and they have no agency and there's nothing but violence in this society for them. No, they're complaining because they're inherently, naturally bitter hags. They love being victims, so it's natural for them to be upset over every little thing. What can you expect? They're Black women. Worse, nothing's ever good enough for women like that. Why do you think they're emasculating men? It's not because they're challenging patriarchal structures. They just hate men. Sneaky thing about creating this caricature is that the ruling class could create this illusion that looked like that they were in a society, that they had created a society where Black women could blow off steam safely. Truth was, politically and economically, they still had this massive social power and grip to violently keep Black women silent and make sure that they couldn't complain about what was being done to them. During this time, there was a ramp up of terrorism on Black people by white supremacists, lynching, all sorts of things. It was extrajudicial violence that said, don't complain, don't look the wrong way, and don't you dare blink, because if you do, we will unalive you. As the federal system was freeing Black people, the control and violence that you needed to uphold the power structure of old, it had to be privatized. If you have this idea of sassy Black women, you can pretend to be way more generous than you actually are. In reality, if you challenged the social system as a Black woman, you were punished violently. Jim Crow Museum said it best, and I'm going to read it to you now. The sapphire's desire to dominate and her hypersensitivity to injustices makes her a perpetual complainer. But she does not criticize to improve things. Rather, she criticizes because she is unendingly bitter and wishes that unhappiness on others. The sapphire caricature is a harsh portrayal of African American women, but it is more than that. It is a social control mechanism that is employed to punish Black women who violate the societal norms that encourage them to be passive, servile, non-threatening, and unseen. How convenient is that? You, rich Black girl, who have an issue with a racist server, you're not a patron paying good money who just wants to be respected. You're hypersensitive. When you're a researcher in film and media and you critique a film's sexist message, you're not a professional with a critical thinking mind. You're just a nag. You are upset with a backhanded compliment from a colleague. You're not somebody who has inherent self-respect and want to be treated as such. You're somebody who needs to grow up and just handle things. Undermining of your critical thought is how the social power that you recently just got in history gets chipped away at. I was going to call you a sapphire to your face, but this is an idea that hasn't gone anywhere because the majority of Americans have not unpacked the assumptions, racist beliefs, and the things that they've inherited from generations of people. Sapphire accusations are super useful now because it helps handle this social transformation of Black women from long-suffering victims fated to just bear pain to human beings who can assert their own personhood and agency. A way of both accusing us of not taking what we can get, but also being upset with us for not bearing things well. We are no longer good victims. We're supposed to complain about anything because we have it so good. I will be the first to admit I have it really, really good. Embarrassingly good. Don't miss the part where I am thrilled and I get to choose with my own free time that I want to make media about American history and politics. Maybe you're not used to seeing it, but this is what ease and happiness looks like on a Black girl. Joke is on me for thinking I could fit all this into one video. The tricky thing, though, I will say about sassiness is that if it's earmarked as unnecessary and hypercritical and hypersensitive, what that does is it makes existing power structures that are oppressive not seem as oppressive as they actually are. Because we're not reacting to something real. We're overreacting to something small. Sassiness can be cute. It can be feisty and adorable and something acceptable, and therefore still in control of the ruling class, still something that amuses those who are on top. In short, there's nothing in short about me. To end this, if we're sassy and we're adorable and just little complainers and princesses, we still have it really good. And there's nothing to actually tear down or attack. Do you think the sassy mammy caricature ended like in the 1800s where it began? I am not so happy to inform you that if your grandparents were born any time between the 30s and the 40s, they got a good dose of that. And that was one of the first, probably one of the first understandings of what Black women were. And if they are not like massive anti racist activists, they probably haven't rooted that out of themselves. And so it's still zooming around in this community. You're going to have to finish this tomorrow, but I would like to know where people tell you that you have been self victimized and if you're being just sassy and angry. I said, I'm really grateful for all of you. You guys are wonderful, and it is so much fun discussing these things with you. See you later.
So this is all I got from this video, and this is more like every Black woman's life experience or every Black person's life experience, right? And the fact that most of them do not really feel like they are doing something or they have done something and there is need to fix some certain things is just very wild. Yes, it is. And I love the fact that you said that you really have to start pushing back, because that is where the whole thing, because sometimes we kind of not push back. We're just like relaxed. We're okay with some certain things and all that. Not until you wake up and you say that this thing is, I know this is not okay for me and I will not let anybody treat me this way anymore. And now, mind you, the truth is that some people, I mean, this is more like a general experience, like people that look like me are kind of having, where they somehow, the other side somehow feel like there is a part that is human, like the other part does not deserve anything good or does not deserve to be treated really great, right? So you all are kind of not human. But I keep saying this, not until you as a human being start seeing the other person that does not look like you as a human being, not until we are ready to accept one another. I know that we all have flaws and all that, we cannot be perfect and the rest of it, but not until you start seeing me as a human being. If not, I don't think there is anything, because first of all, you really have to acknowledge that I'm a human being, that I have feelings like you do, that I have pains also, that because I look this way does not mean that my pains are kind of are not, or I do not experience pain, because that is how they make it look. And they feel like as a Black woman or as a Black person, there are some things you are not supposed to do, you are not supposed to say, or in general they feel like as a Black woman, you are always angry, you are always hyperdensive, emotional and sensitive. Like all these all these are stereotypes. And number one is that I really do not even know where they got all this from, but this is something that has been there and the rest of it. And another one is minimizing people's experiences, because then they feel like our experiences are not valid. And they also feel like we are not victims, like they are the victims, like we are not oppressed, that they are the, I mean, they are also oppressed. That's why most times when you tell them your experiences and all that, they tell you no, you don't know how we feel and all that. And then when we talk about their privilege, they tell you that they never have any privilege and the rest of it. The truth is that these people will never agree, not even for a day, that they have what do they call it, that they have privileges, not until you ask them to give up that they're distant, then they will see them all turning red and green and the rest of it. Man, it's really been a long time coming for people that look like me, and I am really so happy for how far we have gone, seeing that a lot of Black women are very educated, pushing it back forward and making great efforts for themselves, standing up for themselves, and the rest of it is really a very great thing to see, that how far Black women, most especially, I am not talking, Black men also have come a very far, they've really come far also with what they are doing and the rest of it. But a very big shout out to every one of you for how far you have come and where you are going. I see you standing up for yourselves. I see you all doing what you can do to better the community. I see the love you spread around. I see how strong you all are. But we cannot keep being strong, because all the time I say, I want to be strong like a Black woman. We are not going to be strong until we die. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to be tired at times, and it's okay to be weak. We are no longer choosing to be that strong, because that is something that they've always they are strong and all that. And most importantly, I mean, let's keep being us, and let's keep doing, or let's keep elevating ourselves. I mean, yeah. So far, so good. See you all in my next video. Bye for now.